Hello! I just came back from Every Northwest, and it just so happens that the trailer for G5 has decided to release right before I left for it. So, and that the timing makes things a bit interesting here. But anyway, my room's a bit of a mess right now, and I honestly don't have the time to clean it up to record this video, so just deal with it. Lots of stuff still to unpack and clean up, but not a big deal, because that's not the focus of the video anyway. My room is not the focus. Don't focus on that. Don't even focus on my face. Focus on the t-shirt, or the sweatshirt though. But anyway, it's been a while, hasn't it? I'm not dead by any means. I've just been very busy with stuff. And I can't talk about at all of what I've been working on for the past few months. It's NDA work, so I just can't talk about it. Nothing can be talked about. Hopefully sometime in the future, I will be able to talk more about that project I'm working on and all that kind of stuff, but for now, can't say anything. All I can say is that it's just taken up all of my time, and I haven't been able to do much in terms of like streaming myself doing work or continuing my other projects, like in full force or whatever. I just don't have the time for it at the moment, but hopefully, maybe sometime next year, maybe we'll see. Me will have time for that, or I will have time for that. Because once that work is done, I want to get back into things. I want to get back into everything in full force. But at least for now, I want to take a quick short break from that. Not just because I just came back from Every Northwest, but the trailer did just drop, and I do want to talk about it. The My Little Pony Generation 5 trailer has just released. Finally. I was sort of anticipating taking time off to talk about this way sooner than this. But I guess Netflix movies typically only have full trailers released about a month or so before they release. And this movie releases on September 24th, so yeah. A major downside for waiting so long for this, though, is how much of a mystery this movie has been for everyone in terms of how it was going to look and how it was going to animate. For nearly half a year, all we had to go on were promotional renders and toys to figure out what the heck this movie was really about. And to be perfectly honest, a lot of the marketing and promotional material that were used were pretty inconsistent, to say the least. But the worst part is that a lot of this stuff wasn't going to represent how the final movie is going to look at all. There's a lot of promotional renders out there for the characters in this movie that tend to not look quite right for a variety of reasons, not necessarily because their models are bad or rigged poorly or whatever, but because of their posing being sloppy, either because they didn't have time to pose that particular pose, they were on a tight time constraint, for example, maybe, or maybe the people that were posing these models weren't people that were behind the movie, but perhaps some other third party that pose these models and don't really understand what makes the models look good. Or thirdly, there could be some interference from higher in the corporate chain saying that these models need to be posed like this, like based on some 2D drawing or whatever, and they try to pose a model like that, and it doesn't turn out that great, but Hasbro was happy, or whatever, I don't know. There could be a variety of reasons, and unfortunately, these promo renders were the only thing people had to go on for a long time, and they served as a first impression for a lot of people, which may have set expectations pretty low for some people. And this is why I am so happy to finally see this trailer release, even though it has felt like it arrived really late, a lot later than it should have been. It finally shows how gorgeous this movie looks, despite the lackluster marketing. And also, now I have an opportunity to talk about what I think about the animation, the rendering, the models, and so on. Talking about the promotional renders weren't going to get me anywhere, because there was no way the promotional renders were going to look like the final film. Every time we saw screenshots from the movie itself, or any sort of promotional animation that's probably done by the movie crew, it's pretty clear that there is a lot of talent behind the scenes working on this film. And it's just unfortunate that a lot of the marketing has a lot of more lower effort or lower talent or whatever working on promoting the visuals, I guess, of the movie. Anyway, done with that tangent. So, some notes before we talk about the trailer. First, I'll be focusing on talking about the visuals that are present within the trailer, which means I'm not going to be talking about anything really related to the story other than what's, like, obvious on screen in the trailer itself. There are way better people to look for on YouTube that can give you better analysis and predictions about the movie's story than me. I am far more comfortable talking about what I can see with the visuals of the movie, because that's more of what I specialize in. And secondly, I won't be talking about anything related to the recent leaks regarding the particular picture book of the G5 movie that spoils some aspects of the story. If you want to find out more of that stuff, you can find that in your own time and in your own doing, but I'm not going to be talking about any of that. I'll be talking about my thoughts on the whole movie in due time, but I won't be doing that through these kinds of major leaks. Now, with that all said, let's actually talk about this trailer. Alright, hello everyone to the unscripted section of the video. I feel like it would be better to go over this trailer and talk about things as I go through it live instead of scripting something out. I just think doing it live would be more, I'd be more able to describe myself as I go through it instead of just trying to describe it through script first. So, yeah, that's why I want to try it like this. Now, before we start, there are 2 versions of the trailer that are out. They're both very, 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 very similar, except there are a few new shots, or shots that already existed but are a little bit more clear of what's going on in the other version. And we'll be taking a look at both. Just the one downside for that second trailer, and that second trailer is on Netflix, by the way. Netflix itself has a preview trailer that's a little weird, but has some new scenes. Is that the Netflix trailer is in 16:9 cropped. It crops out the sides completely. It's a center crop for everything, and it looks a bit strange for some shots because it doesn't consider the composition for anything. It's just cropping to the center for everything. That's a little weird, Netflix, but alright. But anyway, it does have some new scenes, so we'll be going back and forth a couple times to look at those, but for the most part, we'll be sticking to this trailer since it actually has everything in frame. Now, we open up the trailer with just looking at the lighthouse, which is where Sunny lives. You can see a sign to the left saying Maritime Bay. Yeah, it's nothing too crazy to take note of, because I'd rather take a look at the animation itself. But, of course, the visuals look really nice. The environment work is good, and I think I'll be talking more about the environment work a little later in the trailer. There's some really good examples I want to show later. But for now, it looks pretty good visually. Now, as soon as we cut to the next shot, we get to something fairly interesting. We see Argyle turned on that lamp there. And if you don't know Argyle is the dad of Sunny. Now, the lighting of this lamp is quite interesting. It's obviously quite mesmerizing to look at visually. It looks gorgeous. But I will note that this is a lamp that's probably not physically possible in terms of how it's making the all the shapes of the unicorns look on the wall there. Not to say you can't have like a paper cutout to, mask out a shape of some kind. There are a few things here with this lamp that doesn't necessarily line up with that. So for one, the size of that lamp, I don't know how. I might, this might be a better question for like engineers, because it's not something that I specialize in necessarily with like knowing how things like this would work. But there are a lot of shapes and layers to the to light here. You can see there's like a front layer with some of the ponies, and some of the layers with like some of the stars is like moving on its own as well. It's on its own layer. It's not moving in sync. So there's probably like 2 layers of a sphere or dome maybe on like surrounding the light itself. But I have to be curious, like how small the light source would have to be in order for that all to fit in that small frame. You can see how small that thing is. I don't know. Maybe it is physically possible, but it is a lot of detail in that lamp. But the other thing, which I am more confident in saying, is the fuse light from that lamp is still casting as if it wasn't getting shadowed by that the masks that are creating these shapes. So if this was a real life thing, you wouldn't see all this like more dim light diffuse off in this cone above the lamp. You would just see a lot more darkness, and then you'd see the bright spots in the cutouts and the masks for the ponies and the stars and stuff. This is not necessarily saying it's bad, by the way. I think it looks way better this way in terms of like the artistic direction. But also there's probably a technical reason for this. If you were to do this in 3D in like a ray trace scene, you wanted to like have a light source cast a bunch of unique shapes on the wall. A way better way to do that, instead of actually creating this model that covers the entire light source in your 3D scene to cast these shadows in this particular way. Instead, you have a different light source that casts a texture onto a surface as if it was a light. So I would imagine, I don't know for sure, but I would imagine that they just have 2 light sources. One for just the normal lamp itself, which is what's causing this normal looking diffuse light coming from the lamp from the top. And then they have the second lamp, the second light source, that has this very precisely controlled texture. And this texture is what controls how the light is cast through the top of the lamp. I don't know if that makes sense. Hopefully that explains that well enough. There's actually one thing I want to see here. Yeah, I figured that would happen, actually. So, an artifact that might happen, because I think there's 2 lights that are doing this texture masking thing, so that would be 3 lights total. The main diffuse light, which is causing just the normal diffuse over here. And then there are 2 other lights. One for the first layer, and the second one's for the second layer. I think the most obvious artifact that's in the scene I can point out is this right here. If you see in my mouse, I'm going to wave it around a little bit. You probably see that. I might even zoom in on it in editing when I start editing this, so make that easier. But there is a star here that is overlapping the horse here, the pony. And if this was a realistic scenario, the light wouldn't stack here. Because if it was real life, it would just be only one light doing this. So if you have 2 layers overlapping each other, you wouldn't be able to see the star like this. You can see it's like normal brightness, and then it's like doubling on top of it. If it was real life, it would just still be the same brightness, if you get what I mean. So yeah, that's what I was looking out for. I wasn't sure if it would have that. I didn't check for that beforehand, so that seems to confirm what I think they are doing here. Because if they were doing it through actually making a physical object that masked the actual light realistically, it would take a lot more time, for one, to actually model that out. It'd also take a lot more time to render, because that would inherently cause a lot more noise in the scene. So, a lot more time to render, more expensive. So, yeah, this seems to check out. I think that's what's going on here. I'll reiterate that this isn't a critique necessarily against it or anything. This still looks really good. It's just pointing out some signs of how this was done, in a way, if you get what I mean. So, anyway, let's just move on. You're just talking about, like, the first 2, like, see the shots here, and we haven't moved on, so.
Why can't we be friends anymore? Why can't we
I see some, non-continuous motion here. This is something I probably would critique a little bit, but it's really minor. So we have Philly Sunny here. And at the start of it, it starts off really nice. Subtle movements with the eyebrows as she talks, asking the question why we can't be friends anymore. As for the lip syncing, it seems to check out as well. I don't know, it's sort of just an observation just for me, but it's interesting to see how they handle moving the lip corners throughout a whole line of dialogue. Because the problem I've had in the past with lip syncing that I am trying to fix is I move the lip corners way too much in and out as we talk, and it doesn't look natural. So I try not to do that. I always pay attention to, hey, how do they manage lip corners through this line of dialogue? Do they keep it more tame? Do I try to keep it more static so that the actual lip shapes can actually be more pronounced, or what's the deal? I don't know. There is one thing I want to critique though, and it's sort of the lack of continuous motion near the end. Let me see if I can do this in slow motion here. Okay, so before we do that, let me point out something that I noticed. So the eyebrows and the actual head itself lacks continuous motion. And what I mean by that is that all of a sudden those 2 things just stop moving completely. I like to call this like hitting a brick wall in animation. You just have nice continuous motion, and all of a sudden your movement just stops. And that's really easy to do in 3D animation. You just have it suddenly stop after having smooth motion beforehand, and you want to try to avoid that whenever you can. In this example, perhaps they didn't quite do that, because near the end, the head has stopped moving pretty much completely, and then I'm gonna start watching this in slow motion. So head has stopped moving, eyebrows go up, they go back down slightly, and the brows have stopped moving now as well. And I think the eyelids do this as well. Yeah, the eyelids stop moving completely. There's just a lot of things just stopping. And that's something I would probably, if I was like an animation director or whatever, I would probably say, hey, can you just make that move a little bit more? Just have it a little bit more continuous motion here, so it's not completely static. So yeah, that's my first constructive criticism so far. In the next shot here, we actually have a better angle of this lamp here. And you can clearly see the light source is actually at the base of the lamp right here. That raises a lot of questions, unless there's actually another light source on top too. I don't know. Again, that's more of an engineering question that I don't know. That's not my expertise.
Maybe one day we'll figure it out.
Maybe one day we'll figure it out, he says. This shot overall is really strong. You can see Sunny staring at her dad. And when her dad says, we'll figure it out, she reacts with a very subtle smile there as a reaction. We got overall good body and facial animation from Argyle himself. I do notice the lip corners are actually quite fast for him too when he says figure it out. Like at the very end, out. The lip corners go from here to here in like an instant. You can see like, boom. Like that. It's really fast. Fully extended to like fully out. It's really, really fast. Not to say your lips can't move that fast in real life, of course. It's just interesting observation that they chose to go that route for that lip sync. And I guess one thing I can critique with the animation, just the one thing, that's actually something I probably would change, is how Argyle's right hoof moves in this scene. After Argyle's sort of done petting the side of Sunny's face, I suppose. I guess sort of as like a calming gesture. There's a bit of a weird movement with how the right hoof resets to a more neutral position near the base of Sunny, I suppose. To me, it looks like they have an IK controller, sort of just sitting there to the left of Sunny's face. And then they, let me actually get more of my webcam visible here. There you go, that should be better. They have an IK controller, which is a tool in animation that, if you have this IK bone, or IK controller, and it's placed in space, the arm, or whatever's being controlled by the IK system, is gonna keep the end joint in that position regardless of where the body moves or whatever. If you were using forward kinematics, which is sort of like the default behavior of an armature rig, if you were to move the body at all, it would also move everything attached to it just as much, like that. But if you have an IK, you can keep it still in place, if you get what I mean. Just a quick explanation for that. So IK controller is sitting there on the left side of the Sunny's face, and then they just set a keyframe to the end position, which is where that is. You can see it just ends right there. It doesn't feel like a really natural motion because it just feels like the IK controller is just going in a straight line to that position, instead of like going in an arc like an actual arm would do. So instead of it going straight, it'd be more like going in an arc, maybe raising the hoof a little bit and then set it down. Maybe that's probably something I'd probably try to do if I were to do that differently. But yeah, it sort of just glides there. Again, a minor thing. I'll always point out minor nitpicks and critiques when I go through these kinds of things very in-depth. So be wary of that. I will continue to do so. Next shot, we have the alarm clock in Sunny's room. You can see the lamp still there. You can see the main 6 figurine still there. Again, not much to say other than that, though, because there's no characters on screen, so we are going to move on. And it looks like this section where Sunny opens the door is incredibly short. This is less than a second long, so there's not much to really grab from here, but there is still something I want to point out. I will not take credit for noticing this effect. This is actually something that Minty Root found and pointed out on Twitter, and this makes perfect sense. So if we take a look, I'll zoom in on this in editing. But if we take a look at the door, you can see that there's a lot of motion blur around the side of it, which is obvious because it's opening fairly quickly. But if we take a look very close to like the actual frame of the door, you can see that there's like a darker ring of the sky around it. And that's not entirely unrealistic. Just due to how motion blur would work with lights passing through it, and in a single frame, when a camera snaps a picture in real life, there's going to be naturally less light passing through that area, because a door used to be there, but as the camera was being exposed and capturing the scene, capturing all the lights, the door was opening and starting to receive more light from that area. Basically, this all means that that area is receiving less light from behind the door, or like directly around the rim of the frame here. So you have like a darker, more saturated sky just surrounding the edge of that door as it's opening quickly. It is a neat observation, and it makes complete sense in terms of how if it was a realistically like lit environment, which it is. There's so many obvious signs. Like, I shouldn't have to debate this, but there's so many obvious signs that this is a ray traced film. Like, everything in this movie is rendered using ray tracing and bouncing light all over the place to figure out how a light should look. That is a common practice for movies for the past decade. So there you go. Now, as Sunny exits the door, she apparently puts on rollerblades. Now, there's not much to say here because she's going really fast and shoots out of frame pretty fast with the same general stroking motion with the legs. I'm really excited to see more of the rollerblading in the film, so I can actually talk more about how they managed to animate a horse on rollerblades. The only bit of rollerblading we get after this is here, and she's just riding along, just hanging on to the, what do you call this? A cable car? That's not a cable car, is it? It's on tracks. So that's just a train or something. I don't know. Whatever it is, she's just hanging on to it and just sort of just riding along for the ride. Now, this is where I'm going to jump over to the other version of the trailer. Because the other version of the trailer, also having more scenes, also has less watermarking. So that means a Netflix film is not present there. So let's go over to that, and we can actually see a bit more of the detail in the background itself, even though some of it's getting cropped off. I'm curious how Sunny is latched on to this trolley. Maybe it's a trolley. Is it trolley? Regardless, does she have a wheel hanging over something? Is it latched onto something? I'm not sure what's going on there. And I also like this extra bit of detail with this guy on the back of the trolley. He sort of reacts to Sunny being there, and then just kind of like, okay, it's just Sunny, and then just looks to the left. I kind of like that extra bit of detail there. It's just Sunny. She's just rollerblading, hitching a ride. No big deal. Now, let's go back to the main trailer, and we can start off here, right after that. And on the very first frame of the shot, you can see this kid here with his face. And this reminds me of a particular artist from the fandom. I wonder why. Totally could never guess who that could be. I don't know. Who knows? Nobody will know. Okay, anyway. It's just a very expressive face. It reminds me of Emmylou a lot, for sure. There's a lot of influence there, I can tell, with that. Now I also, and now I want to focus on the animation for the kid on the left here, actually. They stop, I don't know if it's a boy or girl, but they stop, to do a little roar of some kind. I don't think it's audible, though. But in order for them to do that and make it look natural, it's kind of interesting how they do it. So the general motion, if you look at the right kid, for how they are running here, is when they start to land, they land on their back hooves first, and then their front hooves really quickly afterwards. Then they launch on their back hooves first, again, looking at the right kid, and then launch up again with the front hooves. It's sort of a jumpy, skippy motion. But you can see on the kid on the left that it was apparently doing that before, just by looking at how they were moving. You don't see the complete cycle, but when they jump up with their front hooves, they land again on their front hooves first, it looks like, just before the back hooves land, especially the back left hoof. And it's also kind of interesting how fast the hooves unfold, I guess, from their, like, what I mean is, like, their hooves are like this, right? Obviously, I'm a human, so I can't really do the same pose, but they're folded up like this, sort of, and then within a frame, they go back to straight. And they do this a lot for the running here. They do this for the kid over here. You can see this left hoof goes straight pretty instantly when they are about to land. They don't do that for when they rise. It's sort of a more smooth, gradual motion, but it jumps completely to straight as they try to land. I suppose that makes the landing during the run more impactful. It would make sense that raising the hoof would be a bit slower than bringing it down because of gravity as well. There's also that. So, multiple reasons why you could justify doing it this way. All those reasons make sense if you want to make something look more natural, because if you follow the laws of physics and all that, it would make sense to go with that route. But, as we can see, the kid on the left, they stay on their rear hooves for a brief moment here. You can sort of see as they land, they straighten up their back quite a bit, but they quickly start to fall over because this is not a balanced position. Because their center of gravity or center of mass, either or, they're very similar, not exactly the same, but they're very similar, would be around here, and that would be directly in front of their hooves, which is where they're planted on the ground. So they would start to fall over naturally, which is what happens. They start falling over really quickly after that, and they start continuing the run afterwards. So even though they were never truly balanced during that, they managed to make it work because they made it very brief. Because they couldn't retain that stance for very long without falling over. And they just do that falling over motion by continuing the run, which looks natural. And as they say sometimes, running in real life is just controlled falling. It sort of is. Because every time you launch yourself up with your rear leg that's behind you, you have to catch yourself again with the leg that's already in front of you. Otherwise, you just fall on your face, pretty much. So, yeah. Interesting little talk there, but let's move on. So, interestingly enough, the next shot already has a pony running in the background here. And it would look like it's because of the Izzy scene coming up, where she is coming up through here. So it looks like there is a cut here that's like through a large passage of time. So it might look like a seamless cut, but there seems to be a lot more going on here. And you can also see that Sunny is sitting down here. She has her hindquarters laying down on the ground, while here she's standing up completely. So yeah, just clearly a lot of signs here pointing towards this being a large cut. But that's the trailer for you. They do that sometimes. Now, this scene could take a while to digest if I choose to, because there are a lot of background characters that are reacting to Izzy that's coming up in a few shots. I guess we'll start with Sunny. Yeah, we'll start with her. She's the most prominent on scene, and also probably the most effort put into animating her. What the indeed. So we start with the head turn. She has a very common way to do a head turn is to have, instead of just doing a simple rotation like this, you have the head tilt down first and then straight back up again. It depends on, certain situations why you'd want to do certain other things with head rotation and so on and so forth, but it's a very common one to do. If you want the head rotation to look more natural, you'd want to have the head rotate not just on one axis, but have the head start wobbling in different axes as it's trying to get to the final position that it wants to be in. So, just do a little bit like that. So, now this is obviously not something you want to do every time, because that's going to get really obvious that what you're trying to do there, but there are many ways to help make sure rotations of the head don't look unnatural. You can just make sure you're not having the head rotation happen on one local axis of the head bone. Mix it up a little bit. Do a little head tilt here and there. Have the head tilts not be in sync with the rotation of the head. Those kinds of things. Because the human body, or any sort of body, these pony bodies aren't perfect. Not every part of the body moves perfectly in sync, even the same joints in different axes of rotation. So just something to think about when you do animation like that. Now, when she gets up from her sit, she actually, instead of what I would expect would happen, would be that they would raise their hind legs first, raise their butt first, pretty much, because in order to actually step forward, they need to be straightened out first. However, in this particular situation, I would assume she's sitting on that bench here. See that? The bench right behind her, because it seems to be in the same approximate location. So she's probably sitting on the bench. So she's elevated a little bit. So because of that, she could probably have her, I think it's her right hoof first? Yeah, she moves her right hoof first. She lifts her right hoof and lets her body weight fall to the ground first. Because that's what would happen. Not to say you couldn't raise your right hoof first to get up as a quadruped by any means, but because, of course, there are many ways you could move your limbs around to get yourself up from a sit like this, but I would probably straighten up the right legs first and then start moving the front hooves after that. But since she's elevated, she could start shifting her body weight forward, raise her right hoof, and land on that as she's falling off the bench, essentially. Catches herself with the right hoof and then steps off of it. Cleanly. Like that. That's what a head duck's for, I would imagine. Head duck is her falling to the ground, catching herself with the right hoof, and then continuing to walk forward. I'm going to take the glasses off. Wearing the glasses with the headphones kind of pinches them too close to my head and it hurts. So I'm going to strain my eyes a bit more so that I can actually not feel pain on the side of my head. Alright, now for the background characters, I'm going to try to do this quickly. So we're going to start with this guy here. He is just staring at the flowers or something. Actually no, I think that guy's staring at the pony running here. You can see his head rotate as she maybe, is running away. So he's like, what's going on? His ear twitches, which means perhaps he's hearing more commotion towards that bridge that's over to, I guess Sunny's left where she's looking. After the ear twitch, we have the actual eyes look towards that direction. No real reaction yet. He doesn't know what's going on yet. We have a head turning towards that direction. Sort of a concerned look because there's commotion. Maybe he doesn't quite know. He or she. I guess we don't know the genders of anyone here. So I guess they don't know what's going on there yet. But it is concerning that there is someone running away from it. So it makes sense. And slightly after they look towards the commotion, they take a step back. They still don't seem to know what's going on, but they are like getting ready to run off away because they already saw other ponies running away. There's still other ponies running away in the background here as well. So yeah, better get ready for something. Now, I'm probably going to skip these two. Their reactions aren't too interesting because all they do is sort of just head turn, and that's it. Nothing too special. The further the background you get, usually the less pleasing the animations will look, and that's usually for good reason. Because there's so many characters on screen, it's usually cheaper to not worry about being too precise with the animation, adding too many details, because no one's really going to notice unless you're me. So, yeah. So I guess we'll start off with, let's see. This pony here also doesn't have a particularly interesting reaction. They just have a more wide-eyed expression from the distance, but it's hard to really tell why. Her eyes were closed beforehand, it looks like, or like really, really close to being shut. And then all of a sudden, it's wide-eyed. Not much to critique because we don't really know what is going on close up to the face. So, but this pony right over here, voice is starting to die. Nice. Appears to be looking at the pony running away as Ro, right at the start of the frame, but pretty much right after. You can see them start looking towards where the commotion is. And again, we wait for the reaction time. Because of course, everyone will have a reaction time of some kind. When they look at something, they aren't going to react to it right away. So if they don't know what's going on in animation, and you want a character to look at something and react to it, you usually want to have them look at it first, and have them see what's going on, and then have them react afterwards, after a little bit of brief time. Because it shouldn't be instant. If it's instant, it's going to look unnatural and look like a fake reaction. So, they're looking at the commotion, and then a brief time later, eyes open up wider, jaw drops, the ears then start to droop back. Now, I guess the only other character that's reacting to something is this one right here. And there's, again, not much to say. It's just a head turn, and I can't really see close up to the face anyway, so fair enough, there's not much to see. Now, for the pony running here on the right, though, I'm not going to say too much about this pony here, because you can't even see her face. She's just running away. Simple enough. But this pony here might have just seen it just beforehand, because they're still looking at the commotion, and then soon after decides, I'm going to look ahead and make sure I know where I'm running towards. Look straight ahead. And as simple as that. So, the next shot is the smoothie booth. This is where it looks like Sunny got her smoothies from, as we saw in the start here. You can see there is a smoothie basket, or trailer, that she's carrying. It looks like this is where it came from. The first frame looked quite peaceful. They're like, here's an ice cream cone. I don't know how I'm carrying this ice cream cone with hooves, but here you go. Here's an ice cream cone. Enjoy. I don't know how you're going to carry that out either, but, it is what it is. We have hooves, and we can somehow carry this, and it works out. I'm going to have fun poking fun at that throughout this entire movie, aren't I? Because that's just how it is. It's been like that since, forever, for for My Little Pony. Not just since Friendship is Magic, Gen 4, but like, I'm pretty sure they did that a lot way back in the day too, like the early MLP stuff. But yeah, anyway. Just a peaceful trade of goods. And a few moments later, the ice cream vendor looks quickly to the right. No reaction quite yet. They just probably heard some commotion or saw some commotion with the running away and all that. And after they look to their right, they have a reaction fairly quickly, actually. They must have seen her. They must have saw Izzy. Must have seen Izzy. I can't grammar today. And the reaction is quite fast. But there is still something I like here. We can see the irises in the pupils are shrinking as well as when the eyes open. So, normally in real life, your irises, when you look at the eyeball in real life, the colored part of your eye doesn't grow or shrink. It's just the pupil, the dark spot in the eye. But in cartoons, it's usually both. They usually shrink and grow, the iris and the pupil, for a lot of things. Just to emphasize some sort of emotion. And it would appear that they are doing that here in 3D, which is good. They should be doing that. It makes sense to do that for stylized characters. So, and you can see that the iris shrinking is actually starting to grow again afterwards, if you look closely. Iris and the pupil, by the way, not just iris. The iris and the pupil grow back to a slightly more normal size. Not quite there yet, though, because it's sort of an overshoot. It's an overshoot for the iris shrinking, which is interesting. I like it. And there's also, of course, lots of other overshoot with the brows as well. You can see when the brows scrunch up like this, and they shoot right back up, and then that's the overshoot. They're way overextended, and they start coming back down a little bit more after the overshoot. You can see the overshoot with the ears as well. When the ears fold back down, you can see that's the overshoot frame for the left ear, and then the ear sort of comes right back up a little bit, slightly. It is one of the most basic but also important things to do in animation is overshooting. It is one of the most natural looking motions you could easily do if you put the effort into it. And you have the character on the right. She has a bit more of a natural reaction time. She's waiting to get her ice cream. She probably hears commotion. Come on. Maybe she's reacting to the vendor looking to the right, but it is a fairly fast reaction. But afterwards, she looks at they look at the threat, and once they realize what it is, they react. To reaction time. And by the way, you probably have some fluid simulation going on with that ice cream. Look at that. I have no comment other than that, though. I'm not great with simulation stuff, so we're gonna move on from that. Now this is kind of interesting. This shot here with apparently Izzy. Kinda. To me, this looks more like something that's non-diegetic. And that's usually used for music in movies and games and stuff. But I'm going to use it in the context of a visual presentation. And I think it still works. I think it'll still make sense. So, what I mean by diegetic, so when something's diegetic, that means it's something that's currently going on in the film that every character can see and understand. That it's something that's going on for real. That they can see it and react to it and listen to it or whatever. But when it's non-diegetic, there's something that's going on that only the audience can really see. Or it is something that is something the characters do see in the film, but it is not real. Or it is just their point of view, their perception of what they see. Perception's probably the right word to use here. Because these characters are frightened of unicorns, for reasons that we do not know yet. So they would just see unicorns as this monster. So what they do here in this scene, when they render this out, is they place a light way past here, past the bridge. And they probably have some paper cutout model with this crazy look in the hair, supposedly, casting a shadow. Because I don't think there's actually a light that bright over here anyway. So, like, I think we saw that, maybe? Did we? Do we see this bridge? No, we don't. I don't think we do. No, we don't. I think we saw it in one of the screenshots, though. But it was, like, at a different time. So, but anyway, whatever light's there is probably not a real light that is actually physically there in the world. Just people perceive that light to be there, casting the shadow onto the ground to then show this monster that the audience also will see. Kind of an interesting way to present it. I like it. Also got more background ponies to look at. We have a pony ducking for cover behind a sign, and actually does a pretty good job concealing themselves from our angle, but probably not from Izzy's angle, so that's kind of weird. But, you know, that happens sometimes. You usually want to make sure the audience can see what they're trying to do, and not necessarily what the perceived threat is can see. Make it more clear to the audience, I guess, in some ways, though that still kind of confuses me. I usually try to think more logically when it comes to this. If this was something that was more properly done, in terms of, like, if it was more realistic, I should say, maybe they duck for cover and then move the sign in front of them to conceal them or something. But regardless, they do a good job concealing themselves. You have this character down here now, who's taking some steps back, but then sort of freezes in place and starts shaking their head, as you can see. Like, oh no, what is this? What is this thing? They kind of freeze up and don't know what to do. They sort of don't know how to react, which is not uncommon in real life, where people have a flight or fight response. Like, there you go. Some people have a flight or fight response, but sometimes people have that reaction late. Usually they freeze up before they end up deciding what to do. They're just frozen in place because they don't know what to do. They don't know what they are feeling. They just feel frightened, and they don't know how to react yet before they go with the flight or fight. And it's usually flight in this case. And also, it looks like there's a picture of Hitch here. I didn't notice that before. Hello, Hitch. Now, here's more signs that there are a lot of large cuts here. We see Sunny standing up in the last time we saw her in this trailer. But now she's, like, on the ground. So, how'd that happen? Anyway, on the first frame, and you can see in the first couple frames, actually, she appears to be stunned from something. Again, probably out of context, we don't know from what. But her eyes and facial expression in general look a lot more relaxed, or dazed, perhaps. But then when she reacts to Izzy walking up, it would look like anyway, she quickly becomes more stunned and like, oh, hello, who is this? The ears droop back quite quickly as well. And then we have Izzy. And it's interesting that they decided to have a lens flare here. You can see there's a lens flare, and there's a flare here. Interesting choice. It is what it is. There is a sun back there, so kinda. If it was a sun, it looks kind of dim for a sun. I would expect that to be more bloomy, but whatever. Maybe it's like a really, really good camera with really amazing dynamic range or something. Now, there is something very interesting here that I want to point out. Look at Izzy's eyes. There's a specular highlight here that is getting reflected onto the surface of the eyes, despite the fact that her entire face is in the shade. The sunlight is directly behind her head. Yet, in the reflections of her eyes, it looks like, I'm not sure how, but it looks like there is some parts of the sky visible, and the sun seems to be catching some light on the surface of the eye, near the cornea. So, there's actually going to be a lot of this going on throughout the entire trailer. You'll see a lot of specular highlights on the eyes that probably shouldn't be there, realistically speaking, but they happen to just be there because they were placed there manually by the art direction team, or whoever's doing this, because having an eye shine of some kind looks way more natural and alive, more importantly, than not having one, usually. The shot beforehand, actually, Sunny didn't have an eye shine, but that's probably because they really want to emphasize the fact that she's getting shadowed by Izzy. So it makes sense. But Izzy's face is also getting shadowed a lot too, so it's kind of interesting that they still decided to shine something into Izzy's eyes, but maybe they wanted to make her look very friendly and welcoming as possible to the audience, so they decided to have one there. Maybe. Again, I don't know for sure, but that's what it looks like to me, and if I were to speculate, that's what it looks like. That would be the path of logic that I would imagine they went through when deciding to do that. Now, here's one of my favorite shots from the trailer. So, of course, we have Hitch at the front here, just saying unicorn attack. Frankly, nothing too special to say about Hitch himself. But what I like a lot is Sprout in the back, just reacting to all this. Sprout in the back looking fairly confident. He's like, Oh, I'm seeing all these ponies running, but I'm not sure from what. But whatever it is, it's probably not a big deal. I'll probably can take care of it. But then he looks. And then he reacts. In fact, I think Sprout might be looking this way because he heard Hitch starting to say something. Like, maybe yell something, I should say. So Sprout was like, okay, let's take a look. What are you yelling about? And then the reaction comes. Oh god, it's not that. Slams his head into the door. And falls. It's so good. I love it. Look at this. That is amazing. I love it. Bam. Ah! It is... While, I don't think 3D can be as, cartoony as some Gen 4 animation, especially with Pinkie Pie. This is a clear example of the fact that the G5 movie, can still have a lot of over-the-top expressions when it needs to. It probably can't push it too far in some places, otherwise the rigs would start to break in ways that would look weird. So that's something to be cautious about when animating in 3D. You want to make sure the limitations of your rig aren't being broken in a way that's noticeable when you're animating. Of course, breaking the rig in and of itself isn't a bad thing as long as you do it in a way that people won't notice. Yeah, anyway, that's generally the rule there. And I also really like how his body starts dashing immediately while his head sort of stays in place. So there's reaction, and the body just starts moving immediately while the head stays in place, and then the head just, like, is getting dragged along with the body. It's like the body wants to move before the head has time to react that the body wants to move. It suggests that Sprout isn't in control of himself here. It's just an instinct reaction instead of a conscious decision. Slam. And that would explain why. He ran into the door and he didn't even realize it because he wasn't even thinking. Makes sense. Everything checks out. And then as Sprout starts to fall, his gritted teeth just starts opening up. You can just see his jaw completely, like, it almost looks like it's broken, to be honest. Alright, for the next shot, we have Izzy and Sunny together. And it looks like Sunny's really happy to see her. I can only imagine why. But, everyone else, not so much. I think I see something here, actually. I think... I don't know if anyone will ever notice this unless I pointed it out. But I'm going to say it anyway. I think a lot of these background characters are reusing animations. They're sharing animations with each other. So let's take a look at this character in the center here. We see that he quickly turns his head around. Very quickly, actually. I'm assuming it's a he. Anyway. They quickly turn around and then they start anticipating their turnaround into a run by bending their legs down before they jump to their run in the back there. And a lot of these characters seem to start the same animation about here. You can see a lot of these characters. If you look around the center, like in between all these characters in the front and the foreground. The foreground characters are using their own unique animations, of course. The closer the characters are to the back, to the camera, usually they're going to be hand animated from scratch using unique animations. But the further in the background you get, you can get away with using animations. This is not uncommon. But you can see a lot of these background characters start running away in sync, and their animations tend to line up quite a bit. So, when we see these characters turn around real quickly, you can see here in the back as well. It's just the clearest view of one of the other characters in sync. When they start to kneel down, you can see a bunch of other characters starting to kneel down at the same time, in the same way. This character, this character, this character, I think the character over here, this character here probably. Yeah, I think so too, yep. And I think there's a character here behind Izzy's leg and tail that's doing the same thing. kneeling down the same exact time, and jumping at the same exact time. It's incredibly brief, and it's in the background. So, you know, I don't think anyone's ever going to notice this until I upload this video and say, hey, this is what's happening, and then people are going to notice. So, just an observation. Again, not a critique. It is clearly just efficient workflow for animation. And no one's going to notice, pretty much. Now, before we get to the foreground characters, it's kind of unknown why they are surrounding Sunny and Izzy here. They were running away before, but now they're back, and then they're running away again. So, no context there for that yet. Alright, so anyway, let's start with the kid here on the left. The kid with the hat. Seems to react to something. Again, it's kind of weird. We don't know what... It's hard to tell what they're reacting to here in the context of what you're shown. But they're reacting to something. And, of course, I mean, obviously they're reacting to Izzy, but it's like, well, why are they surrounding Izzy in the first place when they were already running away? It's like, anyway. But the kid starts to turn around and then anticipates the run by kneeling down and then jumping away. And it looks really good. I like the expression. It looks really nice. Nicely done. The gray pony on the left side here as well does something similar. But first, before he starts turning around, it looks like they flinch first. They flinch by doing a step back. They do a quick step back, and it's like, oh wait, I shouldn't flinch. I should be turning myself around and run away. And that happens in very quick succession here. Now the pink pony on the right here reacts fairly quickly, turns around pretty much instantly into a run. So very quick reaction from her. And on the pony on the very right, we don't really see them jump up to a run because it gets cut off pretty quick here. But it looks, yeah, it's like just about as they get into the run. So it's similar in how fast it is, but their reaction time is a little delayed, I guess. You have a little overhead shot here, but there's actually not much to comment about because there's not much to see. We just see the top of every pony here. And then here's a shot where the bird dies. Rest in peace. The bird is actually pretty stylized in how it's proportioned because it's sort of just a bean, pretty much. They're shaped like beans. And I'm not sure how I feel about that because there's a lot of animals we've seen so far in this trailer. Not yet. Later in the trailer, you'll see a lot of other animals that are also similarly stylized. I'm not sure how I feel about that. But with what I do here is kind of cool. Because it's just, compared to everything else, this is like more stylized animation. Because it's very quick and sudden. The bird just instantly just starts falling instead of losing balance. It still works because of how stylized it is. And when they land, there's a very, very quick bounce, and then they quickly settle down with the body. Very, very quickly. While the wings still slowly settle down afterwards. Now, for the sake of time, I'm going to stop covering a lot of these background characters, because it's going to be a lot more of the same thing. They're going to look, react, and then run, kind of thing. Or they're already running, or they already reacted, or whatever. So, we're going to not cover too much more of that. So, for the next shot, let's focus on this character that jumps into the manhole cover. Or, it's not going to be called manhole cover in this universe, obviously. So, I'm not going to say it. But, it's probably called something else. But, I'm just going to call it a manhole cover, because everyone's going to know what I'm going to be referring to when I say it that way. So, when the pony jumps into the manhole cover, you can see the animation starts to become a bit more stylized again as well. Because if you were to do this in real life, you would just face plant into the manhole cover. The manhole cover would not react this way. Just based on the geometry of manhole covers and how it's designed, to where the manhole cover never falls in its own hole. Because it's a circle. That's the only shape that would do that. So if you slam something to the side of it, it wouldn't, like, flip like this in real life. But this is a stylized animation here. So we just accept it. So, with that, we move on to how it reacts. So let's just say, okay, let's just accept that this is something that happens. And the manhole cover just goes flying up like that through rotation. What's kind of interesting here is that we see this pony's head, and we see this manhole cover sort of going through the body here, you wouldn't notice if you weren't freeze framing here, but so we have this side of the manhole cover. We're going to track this, okay? We're going to go next frame. So since the pony was going in through the right side, we'd expect the manhole cover to rotate. If you were to track that single point, it would be flying underneath and it'd be going through this way. And somehow that manhole cover got behind this guy's helmet near the back of the head, which would hurt a lot, by the way. Like, how would that happen in a single frame? I don't know. But, again, you wouldn't notice that. It's stylized animation. And that's why they do it. And that's why they should do it. Because it still sells the effects that if this guy's just jumping into a manhole cover and you just accept that that's how it happens. But when you start to break it down, of course, it doesn't tend to work. But that's not how these films are meant to be digested. It's meant to work in motion. And in motion, it looks fine. And then, of course, when the manhole starts flying up, it just somehow lands perfectly in place. No big deal. Again, stylized take. Now, here is where I want to talk about Izzy specifically and the weight shifting aspect of the animation. This is something I really, really like to pay attention to whenever I see animation or anything in real life, is how body mechanics work and how the weight shifts around as something moves. So we can sort of see Izzy starting to have her front part of her body. For the sake of simplicity, we're only going to focus on the weight shifting on the front part of her body, where her front legs are. So at the start, we see that she's already starting to weight shift towards the her left leg as she raises her right leg. And of course, if they didn't do this, they'd start falling over towards their right side because they become imbalanced. So that's why she's weight shifting to her left, so that she can stay balanced and continue walking forward. And she does this for the next couple steps. She weight shifts a little bit to her right, so she's a little bit more balanced as she takes the other step. And once we get to her final step, they don't weight shift immediately to her other hoof on the right side, on her right side, I should specify. We wait until her head tilts over to her left side and then weight shifts to her right. Like, her whole body weight shifts to the right. It's sort of the thing where her head looking over to the left is causing her body to react with an opposite reaction, where the body shifts to the right side. Which is common in animation, because that's, again, how you achieve more natural motion. It tends to be more balanced motion as well, so if you keep stacking body motions to be more one-directional. So, like, for example, if we have the body weight shift to her right, and then her head starts to weight shift to the right, and then her head tilts to the right, they would become imbalanced, and then she'd fall over, realistically speaking. So, having good opposite reactions to keep things in balance is good. It's a good thing to do. Now, I want to point out a quick little compositing error I found, interestingly enough. So, if we frame step and look at Izzy's right hoof on this frame, her hoof is kind of poking into the ground here, which isn't uncommon, by the way. That's usually fine, because especially when it comes to bodies that are supposed to be soft, if you try to make sure nothing is clipping into each other if you have a body trying to touch a harder surface, if you try to make sure nothing's clipping, it's going to look like the body's not even touching it. So if you move the body, that body part or whatever, slightly into the surface, it'll look more like it's flushly touching the object or whatever it is. So intersecting things, it's common and it's usually fine. But what's weird here is that you can still see that part of the hoof that's clipping into the ground here. And the reason why is because I would imagine that they have Izzy on a different render layer. They are rendering Izzy separately compared to everything else in the scene, which is a common thing to do when rendering things at an industry level standard for films. You usually don't want to render everything in the scene all at the same time at once, because if you make a mistake somewhere and you want to quickly correct it, you'd have to re-render the whole thing over again. But it just looks like when they rendered this Izzy out, they didn't properly mask out the area where this part of the hoof wouldn't be visible. So there you go. You see the hoof where you shouldn't see it. That's how that happened, I imagine. After this shot, I might take a break from recording, because I've been recording for a couple hours now, just looking through footage and talking about it. Of course, it's going to be edited down to be shorter, but I need a break. So if you see a weird cut of, like, suddenly I'm wearing different clothes, different lighting, whatever, that might be why. But anyway, let's talk about this shot. So for context, she says...
Is every pony playing hide and seek? I see you!
So that's the context. She thinks that this is a game of some kind. Perhaps she's not quite sure why everyone's freaking out. She doesn't understand the situation or the stigma or whatever. So she just thinks it's a game. So she immediately tries to jump into this game that she thinks she's in. Her ears perk up when she sees someone, or some pony, during this hide-and-seek game. Her ears perk up immediately, and just shouts, "I see you!" And then have a cute little ear tilt. Just one asymmetrical ear tilt on her right side. Now, there's an interesting rendering error I found here. So, frame stepping, let's put your attention to where I want you to look. If we look at her left eye, and you frame step, you can see that her left eye, for some reason, glows a little bit brighter for this one frame, then it goes back to normal. Makes me wonder if they had to re-render that part of the eye for some reason, for that one frame. Maybe there's an error somewhere, and they didn't quite get the lighting settings correct or something, and something weird happened there. I don't know. It's hard to know what happened. It's weird. It's only for that eye, and that's it. Interesting. I don't know why it is the way it is, but it happened. Now, besides that error, there's something I want to point out as well, where if we look very closely on the reflections of the eye, the specular reflections, we can see some kind of objects, maybe a flag of some kind, here on her left eye being reflected. And then we see the eye shine. We see the eye shine right here. So that would indicate, maybe that's the sun over there? Alright, so let's find it on her right eye. Now, if we try to find the same flag, or whatever it is, this one here, it's right here, on her right eye. But yet, the specular highlight is way over here. And in fact, there seems to be some kind of building or something here. And this eye shine is shining right through that building. So, it's just more proof that a lot of these eye shines are actually manually placed on the eye with a specific purpose, instead of it being like a natural thing that happens in the lighting of the sea. So yeah, there you go. That should probably end that subject for the eyes. I probably don't need to talk about it anymore, because that's pretty much how I think they're doing it in a nutshell. We are back now. Later time. It might be a bit darker, I guess. I don't know. So now we got this scene. So after Izzy notices this character behind the wall, or behind the cart, it wasn't great concealment anyway, considering even if this pony wasn't peeking out like this, and it was actually behind it, there's still clearance underneath the cart. You can see their hooves, so of course Izzy would be able to see them. It's the same character from before too, that was on in the cart a few minutes ago, or rather a few seconds ago within the trailer itself, I guess is better. So at the start we see the pony reacting to Izzy noticing them. It's like the ears perk up. Oh no, I've been spotted. And then there's like a very, very, very quick sidestep away from the trailer. And I would imagine this is actually because they wanted to make sure he was close enough to the fence so that he could quickly jump over it for the effect that's coming up. Either that, or they just wanted more of him to be visible during this little freak out animation here, which would also be a valid reason to do so. After freak out, we have a bit of anticipation for the hop coming out, with a very, very quick lowering of the front end of the body. The rear end is actually quite low already, so it doesn't really lower that much, and just already kind of is sufficient enough to anticipate a jump, I suppose. Enough potential energy, you could say, in the legs to bounce them into the position and needed to hop over the fence. And now once they hop over the fence, it gets a little bit interesting here. They actually sort of levitate for a few frames in like the same horizontal plane. So like from here, frame 1, 2, 3, 4, and I think they drop here. Yeah. So 4 frames in 24 FPS. So that is a sixth of a second. 4 frames is a sixth of a second. And this overall cartoony like animation is pretty prominent throughout this section of the trailer during this whole freakout phase with Izzy arriving to Maritime Bay. And then right after the levitation, they just belly flop into the ocean. No big deal. They're fine. Very brief section of a foal, I should say, being frightened of the chaos going on around them. And again, not surprising, realistically speaking. Especially if they're a kid, they wouldn't know what to do in a situation like this. Flight or fight isn't necessarily something they might have an instinct for at this point in life, so not too surprising. And also revisiting the head turning thing I mentioned before, we can see the head turn. You can see a very slight, instead of, of course, the head just turning like this linearly in just one straight line, the head sort of dips down a little bit and comes back up. And there's another axis of rotation they're playing with that's off-synced a little bit. So when the head is done rotating towards the left, there's still a lot of head tilt that's going through. Like, it's sort of like falling through. It's following through the quick motion of the head turn that's causing the head tilt to continue even after the head is done turning that specific direction. These are just ways to make head turns look more interesting and more natural and not as like stiff. I like the attention to detail, and it's good to do it. Good to do it this way. Now, an interesting thing I want to point out is another weird compositing error, it looks like. Just another hint of all these characters being rendered in different passes that gets layered on top of each other based on certain things and so on and so forth. It looks like this character was incorrectly ordered. So this orange character is actually really far behind this kid, this foal, yet his head is in front of the ear, even though it should be way behind it at this point. Now the orange character is like to the side of him, not in front. And yet this tail is way in front of the ear still. So it's just interesting compositing error. I don't think anyone would have noticed unless they were freeze framing like I am. Just a nitpick there. It's not major. It's a bit more noticeable than the hoof example I gave earlier with Izzy, but it is an issue in this shot as well, looks like. Now we have another quick shot of Hitch. Well, this is actually the first quick shot of Hitch, what am I saying? This is like a handful of frames, like 12 frames here. 13 frames, make that 13 frames. It's a very quick shot of Hitch flying over barrels to jump to save the kid from being frightened, pretty much. He technically does a good job of doing that, even though there were some other miscalculations you'll see. But for Hitch here, even though this is a very quick, and you probably won't even notice the expression as you see Hitch jump over because of how fast it is, you can still see they put it in the attention detail to make sure he's expressing in a way that would make sense. He's jumping over these large barrels, so his face would be nice and scrunched up to show that he is putting effort into the jump. And then as he's going for the landing and looking ahead, he's looking a lot more frightened and attentive to where he's going. And as we head on to the next shot, it's actually kind of hard to tell, but I'm not sure if this is supposed to be a continuation of the jump beforehand. I would imagine probably so, but that would be a pretty large jump if it was. But if it is, there you go, that's where he lands. He lands straight in front of the kid and tackles, pretty much effectively just tackles him. Bam, gotcha. Now, I don't know if I should get into this tangent or not, but let me at least start off with animating two characters at once interacting in this way is probably one of the most difficult things you can do in 3D animation. Because there are a lot of complicated things in the armature rigs and the controllers within the rigs that you have to keep track of when you have character interactions like this that are this close, I suppose? Because you have one character basically holding another, doing acrobatics. This is actually kind of insane animation, to be honest. Like, this is really impressive, considering, for one, these are horses, ponies. So, they're quadrupeds, they have to somehow manage to make the animation work, even though they are doing acrobatics and holding another character, and they're four-legged, and there's a lot of moving pieces here. And I'm just talking about Hitch in that example. What about the kid that's being held? How is he going to animate? How is he going to stay attached to Hitch in the actual 3D scene? How do they parent the rig of the child to Hitch's armature to make sure they stay in sync, in motion? There are a lot of variables here. Now, I don't know if I would say these acrobatics were necessary. Just pick up the kid. But maybe this is sufficient, because it would be hard to walk with a kid in hoof if you were to just walk or run, because you would be missing at least one front limb, if not both. You could probably carry a kid with one front limb, as this background character is. Not the kid's mother, as we established later in the scene. But yeah, anyway. When Hitch picks up the kid, there's a huge somersault, and I don't even know where to begin how to describe how difficult that kind of animation work would be, even without holding a character, because acrobatics in of itself is really hard, but doing it with quadrupeds, like I said, is kind of hard to know how to do correctly, because it's not like you can look up a dog doing a somersault or any sort of sequence of acrobatics in this way, right? Like, quadrupeds don't do this in real life. You can't reference that. You have to just be creative, or just reference humans doing this and try to somehow translate this into a quadruped doing it, which is probably how they did this here. And, of course, the added complexity of having the kid in hoof. Hats off. They did a good job here. I have no real complaints with the actual acrobatics part here. It is very brief, to be fair. It's not like there's a whole scene of all that's happening. It's just about 2 seconds of it. But it's still a lot of work to do something like this, even if it's just 2 seconds long. Bravo. And the final comment I want to give, of course, is the actual recovery from the acrobatics. The somersault. Once the somersault is over, while Hitch is already hunched low, he has the ability to just jump out of it and land smoothly with the kid in hoof. Now, the handoff is a little weird looking. Or hoof off, I guess. Anyway, Hitch gives the kid to the mother. What he thinks is the mother, anyway. But there's some weird artifacts here. I'm not sure. Maybe that's just YouTube compression or whatever from the Netflix trailer. But maybe there's some layering error going on, because we see some artifacts on the kid's hoof here. That's probably from Hitch. From behind, maybe? But I don't know. I'm not going to say anything definitively. I'm not sure what might be going on there yet. And also, in this frame, it looks like the Hitch's left hoof is clipping into the kid's legs a little bit. Again, it's very brief, and no one's ever going to notice this, but it's just something worth pointing out while I'm here, I suppose. And during the handoff of the child, it sort of looks like the child was levitating a little bit. Just a little. But I'm not going to complain too much. It's still in motion. It still pretty much links together pretty seamlessly, I think.
Your son is safe.
It works out. I also just noticed another one of those artifacts with the iris glowing for a frame. In that kid's eye there. This frame is glowing a little bit. The next is not. And so is the rest are not glowing. So I'm not sure what happened there. I hope that's not going to be present in the final renders for the actual movie itself, but I guess we'll see. But after Hitch lands, his silhouette is clean. The way his front hooves are posed kind of makes it look like they're sort of crossing. Of course, they're not fully crossed, but they're intersecting a little bit. They're pointing towards a single point in the ground. They're very straight. His entire body is straightened and... Oh, sorry, not straight. His entire front part of the body is raised quite a bit to show confidence and proudness, I suppose, or perhaps a little bit braggy about what he has just done. Of course, I think he probably has every right to be a bit braggy, I guess, but maybe not in this situation if it was actually a dangerous situation, which it isn't. So, I don't know. It still, I would say, probably works out. For characterization, he did a good deed. He's waving the kid off to this pony, thinking it's the mother, but he is poorly mistaken, because it's not her kid. Now, for this head tilt here, when he says...
Your son is safe now, ma'am.
It looks like, to me, that the body shifting is actually not opposite. It actually moves with the head tilt. And that's probably fine in this situation, because it's still balanced. The surface contact of the hooves in that area of the body, in the front of the body, the center of gravity wouldn't move past the point where he'd tip over if his body shifted more to the left with the head tilt, so he would still technically be balanced, and it helps reinforce the weights being pushed forward with this head nod here. So, I don't know how obvious it is to see. So when the head starts to raise, his body actually does start to move opposite. Just a little bit. But then it moves a lot more to the left. To his left. If you can see that.
Your son is safe now, ma'am.
It's just one of those exceptions that you can make if you know how to make those exceptions and where they fit in. Because the character is still balanced in this situation. It works out. Now this, I really, really, really like this start of a run we have here from Hitch too. We start off with Hitch after he's done, boasting about his good deed. He does, I'm not sure what you'd call this, but he sort of scrapes the ground with his hoof, getting ready, and anticipating. It's sort of like a pre-anticipation for the anticipation, if that makes any sense. So it's anticipating this anticipation pose, which is the anticipation for the jump that starts the run. So it's a pretty neat little touch there. And this anticipation is so exaggerated, and I love it. It works really nicely because it's still very fluid. And also, this is probably a really good reference if I were to try to do animations of ponies running more, which I haven't done a whole lot of, I'm not gonna lie. It's just like, oh, so that's how they do it. That makes sense. I like that. I'll probably snag a few tips from that. And snag some pointers, I suppose. I don't know. So during the anticipation, his hind legs straighten up a bit before they lower again as he pushes himself into the run, which is interesting. His front part of the body lowers first before the hind does. Actually, the front of the body was lowering while the hind quarters was raising. Lots of opposite going on here. Front lowering, the hind is raising. So after Hitch starts running, I noticed that if we look at Hitch's left hoof, front hoof, as it lands here, there's a bit of hoof sliding here. The camera's panning a little bit to the right during this, so keep that in mind. The ground is moving to our left, it looks like, as the camera moves right. And his hoof is sort of sliding. Now, you could argue that it's probably sliding because he's moving so fast, and, potentially so. It's not like it's that noticeable anyway, so I'm not going to complain about it too much, but yeah, interesting little thing I noticed there. And now let's focus our attention to the mother here. Well, the supposed mother. After Hitch says, "Your son is now safe, ma'am," her reaction is sort of like, what the heck? And while the audience if the audience is watching this trailer for the first time, they probably wouldn't realize this is what the reaction would be for her. But like, you can see the lips sort of like, they sort of extend up a little bit, like sort of in like a disgusted way, like, oh wait, what? I have a kid? And I also really like how the kid reacts when Hitch says that as well. It's like, oh, I'm not sure if the kid thinks that's his actual mom or not, but I'm sure the kid's smart enough to realize that, but during a threatening situation, maybe the kid finds it more soothing to be with a adult that can look after them in this situation, and that's why they look a lot more relaxed now. Maybe, I don't know. And after a few moments of comedic silence and staring, and these characters trying to figure out what the heck's going on, especially her, we have her reacting with saying, "This isn't my kid." And it's just an interesting little bit of detail of actual weight shifting going on still. We can see her right rear hoof very slightly shifting to the to her right and a little bit in front of her so that she can turn her head to the left a little bit more comfortably, especially while carrying a kid, just so that she can shout, "This isn't my kid." And after the "You're welcome" line, she's just more like confused and disgusted at the same time, especially considering the kid is already warming up to her, which is probably more unsettling because she probably doesn't want the sudden responsibility of a kid, of course. It's a lot to take on, even in a brief situation like this. I wouldn't blame anyone for reacting this way, to be honest, because it's just, why would you hand me this kid and say it's my kid and run off like that? And that ends it for this extended shot. This is one of the longest shots in the trailer. So, yeah, there we go. Moving on. So the next shot, there's actually not too much to talk about. It's just more running of the characters, and it's not even that close to them, so there's not much to really observe. So I guess we'll just skip right over to here, which I do have things to say about this door close. It's very interesting. Very interesting indeed. I don't know how Izzy got that door open while running, unless it was just unlocked. I guess it doesn't even have any locks. It's just, there's no like deadbolt or anything, so I guess technically you could just push it open, so I guess that's fine. Checks out there. But it's very interesting how they get Sunny to close this door while running and still continuing the run right afterwards. It's a very, very smooth transition between different actions. And they sort of keep the action of running intact throughout the entire thing while doing it, even though it sort of slows down a little bit to do this, but it works out really nicely. You may be wondering why Sunny needs to brake hard with her front hose here. And it's due to the body mechanics behind keeping the rear end high in the air in order to use the rear legs to close the door quickly. So if you slow down the front part of the body by breaking your front by digging your front hose into the ground, your rear end is still wanting to go fast, so it's going to stay. I don't have a good analog, do I? Okay, you know what? That's a lie. That is a lie. Are you kidding me? Of course I have a good analog. Here's my good analog. So, it's a bit chibbier in proportion to show this, but just say you're taking the front hose into the ground, and during the run, you already have the rear end pointing up a bit already, and you're digging the hose in the ground. You're slowing the front part of the body a lot more than the rear end, because the rear end is still up in the air. Your rear end is still going to want to fly over and trip. Like, if you were just doing nothing but digging your front hose into the ground, you could probably end up, somersaulting or whatever. Just doing a big front flip. But it's a controlled brake, so she doesn't do that. But it's in order to keep the rear end high so that they can use the rear legs to close the door. I love the body mechanics, man. It's good. And once Sunny gets a footing with her front hooves and starts moving forward again, the rear end will be starting to drop, and that's when she catches it with her rear legs and continues the run. Completely smooth. Very nice. Now, this next shot is really short, and it looks like it's cut short out of context from something, so I don't know if I should really say something about it. I do like that double blink, though. Like, the very, very quick double blink, but, I don't know. It just looks like the shot isn't complete. It's too short because it's a trailer cut, So, I think I'll leave it at that. Maybe I'll talk about stuff like this once the movie comes out. So, moving on. So, this is the first obvious part where the lip syncing doesn't match the dialogue. And, it's probably known to a decent amount of people already, but a common thing trailers do when it comes to editing the trailer is to record the voice actors saying simplified dialogue just for the sake of the trailer being shorter and easier to digest to the end consumer, I suppose. Because it looks like she's saying something else. Minus the actual, dialogue lip sync not being perfect, of course, for those reasons I described. This is just another one of those shots that looks like that's cut short. It is not the full shot from the actual movie because it feels like it's just cutting into the shot midway. There's no way the shot would begin like this. So, yeah, it's starting to get to the point where there are a lot of shots that are very quickly cut together just for the trailer, and it's kind of hard to comment on them because it's not the complete shot. Now, this shot just has a can rolling into the frame, but I don't care about the can. I care about those the detailing on those legs. So, can we give just a moment to appreciate the amount of detail that goes into the fur and the hoofs, the detail of the hooves and all that for these characters? This looks incredible. Just look at all the fur. Oh, I'm always going to repeat this whenever this topic comes up, but G5 really, really, really makes me want to look into getting fur to work for my own models, but it's just, in my opinion, if I were to choose something in Blender to have a significant upgrade to, it would be the hair particle system. It's not good enough for animation for me. I just run into a lot of problems all the time when I try to do it. I could probably make it to work for static renders, but if I try to do animations with fur, it gets really messy real fast. So, and that's also especially true for actual like long hair, like the manes and tails and stuff. So, G5 is gonna make me jealous of that for a while. Hopefully, I can figure that out someday. But yeah, movie looks amazing. By the way, just in case you couldn't tell visually, it is interesting to note that Izzy isn't moving at all during the shot. Again, the focus isn't even on her really. It's the can, but it's interesting to note that there isn't any like just idle swaying or anything that's, even if it's just very subtle movements, there's just nothing. Even with the hair is just completely static and not moving. Even after what, yeah, I don't know. It is interesting. It's not something you probably notice again, because it's not the focus. You're focusing on the can that's entering the shot. But, yeah, they didn't even animate Izzy here in this shot. Right afterwards, we're back to just moving all the time. We have a little mini hop at the start. You can see the right hoof is actually up in the air too, because she raised her left hoof, it looks like, and then jumps with her right hoof so that she can slam on that can as hard as she can to get it flying into the air. And then she starts doing the balancing act. I guess it's not really an act, it's just improv. It's improv, I guess. I don't know. Just showing off what she can do with her horn without magic. Now this is one of those shots, given that it's also Izzy has a lot of hair, but I would love to see this animation for this balancing done with the hair hidden away, which is how I would prefer to animate my own models as well. I like to make sure the hair is hidden so I can actually see the body dynamics in full without anything like blocking my view of it. But from what I can see, let's just see if I can point anything out here. So, what I can observe through the animation work, it looks like the animators wanted to make it look like she is aiming at certain areas of the can. Not just balancing the can, but actually aiming at certain points of the can to open it. And it's, I guess this would imply that Izzy is well practiced at opening canned food with her horn, because they have, I mean, just so they don't have to use a tool to open it, they could just use their own horn that they're born with to open it. So before we go to that point, actually, we can take a look at the can itself. The can is manually animated for one. It's not actually being like simulated by physics or anything. You could tell that the can is manually animated because it sometimes hovers in the air for like an unrealistic amount of time if it was actually being physically simulated. It just hangs in the air for a convenient amount of time for the actual animation to catch up when needed. But anyway, again, just to show that she's well practiced, just based on observing her animation and how she moves and interacts with this can. Of course, if we just start off from the start, she already knows a good way to get the can up and ready to be punctured with the horn. And it looks like she's always aiming for the outer rim of the can here, so that she can actually open up enough holes to loosen the lid. So, rim, 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 and then one final blow to open it up. And that final blow, she knows to step away and let the can go flying, just to show off that she can do that. Tada! There you go. Because you can tell that final hit wasn't an accident or like a drop of the can because she lost her balance or whatever. Like, she intended to open that can. Before we actually show those beans, I guess I do have some negative things to say about what I'm looking at here. So that carpet on the left looks kind of bad. A rug like this would be a lot more, I guess, filled with hair particles, I suppose, or whatever, wool, or whatever you want to call cotton, whatever, what the rug is made of. It's very flat looking because it's just a texture applied to a surface. And I would imagine that the set dressers, or whatever you want to call them, the environment artists, those people that were making this set weren't anticipating the floor to be used in a close-up shot like this. So they didn't anticipate having to make higher fidelity assets to use for a close-up shot. Did I just repeat myself? Am I getting tired? I might be. But yeah, the only definition we have for that carpet is it looks like normal maps or bump maps or maybe even displacement maps, but it's still, at the end of the day, just a mesh It's not. There's no actual particle systems on it at all to show that it is actually just a nice soft rug. So because you can't emulate that effect very well up close with just a texture. You have to have actual particles to represent that detail. And I also have some critiques for the wood flooring as well. While the wood flooring looks fine at a distance, when looking at it this close, you can sort of start seeing that the wood flooring is also just a texture. I don't know if I can really point out any details that would really give this away to like a common viewer, but let's take a look at the bottom of the screen here, where there's some hammer nails on the planks here. In the context of the whole scene, it just looks like that area looks low resolution in terms of detail, not because of the actual screen resolution, but it's just like the texture of that wood and those nails is just too low, and you can start seeing the pixelization of the texture when it's that up close. Around this distance, at least on my screen and on my resolution, or at my resolution at 1080p, these look okay, but up here you can start to see, the texture detail is starting to show. The resolution is not quite high enough for that. But then, to contrast all that, we have beans. And these beans, they probably spent a good portion of the budget just to make these beans look right. I'm not gonna lie, because I wouldn't even know where to start. I mean, I'm not a simulation guy myself for 3D. That's not something I really do that often. I certainly don't specialize in it. But how would you even start creating a system that would simulate beans? Because beans are two things. It has the juice, or whatever, and it has the actual physical beans itself. And they have to interact together in a way that's believable. But yeah, I guess I don't really have too much more to say. All I can do is maybe speculate, but it's not something I specialize in, so I think I'll just skip over it. I just know that there's probably a lot of effort that went behind just making the beans look right. There was one artifact on this frame here, where you can see the beans, during this motion blur here. They seem to shoot up somewhere, and then they disappear. I'm not sure what happened there. I don't know. I guess it's a little weird, but you don't really notice it in motion, so I'm not sure how to really make of that. I don't know. And then afterwards we have the oh man. We actually knew about this shot for a while because it previewed during the voice actor reveal trailer. Not the movie trailer, just the voice actor reveal trailer. That only showed like a couple shots from the movie. Like, it was a very small amount. And this was one of them. And now everyone knows the context for it. It's just for the beans. You start off with the head rotating to the right, left, right, and it's just kind of just keeping that note up. It's almost like she's singing here, honestly. She's singing the Tada. Because that's how I would animate a pony doing like a high note or something. So of course, I won't lie, the smile definitely looks a bit more crazy than maybe they intended it, but I'm not sure. It's not a bad smile by any means. It's certainly just maybe a little too wide-eyed, maybe? I don't know. Maybe it's something I would like to tinker with myself if I could. In terms of like the actual like eye posing here. Because there's a lot of sclera, or, the eye whites visible. And it sort of gives her a more crazy look than maybe they want here, maybe? I'm not sure.
You don't have any magic?
Now this shot actually looks like it's properly lip synced. So that must mean it's actually part of the movie, that line. It's interesting that if we look around her neck, the strap for her backpack, it's sort of like glued to her neck as it's rotating up and down. It kind of ruins the immersion of that backpack being like actually cloth or whatever, leather. And this clearly indicates that the backpack itself is actually just skinned to the armature itself. And what I mean by skin is like sort of attached to the armature, to the bone structure itself, sort of like how the body is already. It's not actually moving based on physics, it's moving based on where the body is deforming with it. It's something that would be acceptable for video games. Video games do this all the time. But it's interesting to see that it's also the case here. But you also got to keep in mind that this MLP movie isn't as high budget as like a Pixar film or whatever. It's not like they can have a very intricate rig or simulation system just for the backpack itself. Unless they can justify the budget to spend on that, and they probably didn't. There's probably way better things they could use that money for. Like, yeah, it's not really been a problem until this particular animation in this particular shot. And it's not even that big of a deal, so I don't really think it's worth complaining about, because everything else in this shot looks really nice, including the lighting. It looks gorgeous.
You don't have any magic?
It did have it. Yeah, okay. Well, that doesn't match with the lip sync either, because, well, it's just another weird recording. But yeah, anyway. Next shot. This is an interesting one because Sunny is mirrored here. She isn't facing the right... Well, the shot is mirrored because Sunny's mane, her braided ponytail, or whatever, is meant to go around her, I guess her right side. And that's always been the case for every single movie, screenshot, or render, or anything. And now all of a sudden we see it mirrored. Either they suddenly decided, oh, we can mirror the mains now, just like we did in G4, where you can mirror the mains to a certain direction that's more appealing for that certain camera angle or whatever. But look, let's just take a look, and let's change it to where this is mirrored properly, not that setting. You want this. Yeah. There you go. Yeah. That looks more proper. Okay. So with that said, here it is with corrected mirroring. So there's the kitchen, and the front door is going to be over here. And if we take a look at the very first shot of this interior scene, we can see that same framed painting or diploma or something. It's the same exact one that we see here. Right here, yeah. I'm not sure what that is supposed to represent. Can't really see it too well. It's kind of out of focus. But anyway, that's just more proof that this is actually not mirrored. They don't mirror the mains in the movie. That's actually just not something they do. Anyway, moving on from that. If you actually look at the animation itself, it's sort of a reaction shot. She is realizing something about Izzy here. There is no context as to what it is, and it would seem like it's not within the context of what we've been shown in the trailer itself, because the composition doesn't line up with anything we've had so far within this house scene. Now, this is almost halfway through the trailer, and I've been talking for so long, and I think I might need to end this here, because this is already a lot to edit through. It's a lot. And I can shorten it by a lot, but it's probably going to be about like a 2-hour long video, I'm sure. So, that'll be fun. I'll probably spend all day tomorrow working on that. So I think I'll just be ending it here. And if, I suppose, anyone wants to see the rest of the trailer analyzed, I don't know if I'll have the time for that, but if you do, I guess you can let me know. But I'm not sure if I'll be able to get to it. I don't know. Just for the sake of time, I think I just have to stop here, because I've had so much to say so far. There's still so much of the trailer to go over. A lot of good stuff to go over. But it's just, I don't have the time. And I feel like I've already had a lot to say. I guess the only thing I didn't get a chance to get to was like, it was like near here, right? Yeah. The environment work within the movie itself. I just love how this movie looks, man. Oh, man. This is that environment shot I wanted to talk about earlier, like at the very beginning. These environment shots go by in a split second, and yet they look really, really nice for what they are. Obviously, I am really sure you could probably just zoom in if you have access to the scene files and whatever program they used to render this, and move the camera closer to the details. You could probably see a lot of, blemishes in the details, of course, but you got to keep in mind that to be smart about how you build assets and build your scenes and build the environment, you just focus on what the camera sees. And it does a very good job of doing that here. There's a lot of detail where there needs where they need to be. And again, I'm not an environment artist by any means, but it's amazing how good this stuff can look from people that know what they're doing. And that's the part that I'm really happy about, because there's clearly a lot of people here working on this movie that know what they're doing, and that makes me really happy. So, yeah. I think that's kind of the general note I wanted to end on, but man, it's been taking a while to get to that point. So, yeah. I'm going to end it now. I'm definitely going to have make time to talk about the movie itself once it comes out. If there's any new animations that I want to talk about that do show up in the movie, then maybe. I'm not sure. But I guess we'll see. So with that, I will see you guys later, and thank you for watching this very long-winded video of this unscripted section of the analysis of the animation. I'll see you guys later.